Hey, okay, we're awake, good. Because this is going to be a session on co-creation, so we want to make sure everybody's energized and ready to kind of participate here. Let me introduce our speaker today and make a couple of comments to connect what we're about to hear with what you heard last week. How many of you were here last week? Oh, just about everybody. Okay, good. So I'm going to try to make a couple of connections, and then I'll turn it over to our speaker. First, a couple things about Frank Piller. He's currently at the University of Aachen in Germany, but also has a very good relationship with MIT and spends a lot of time at both MIT and Aachen without getting either upset about the other. So for those of you who know academic life, this is not always easy to do. He is also, I would describe him as something of an academic entrepreneur, in that he is himself has really been present at the creation of some very exciting stuff in academia that have really become a phenomenon in industry related to mass customization. And so this area of the smart customization group at MIT, I think, really has been an outgrowth of some pioneering work that Frank has done. One of the things that I particularly like about him as an academic colleague is he does wonderful academic research, very carefully done, well-researched stuff, but it asks really interesting questions that people in industry really care about. So very much like the seminar series this semester, his own work, I think, does a nice job of bridging between the academic side and the industry side. This coming fall, Frank and I are going to co-chair a conference over in Burlingame on mass customization and open innovation. We're actually going to try to put these worlds together and see if we can actually get them to fit. So that's actually kind of a nice joint initiative we're undertaking with a lot of help from Solomon, Richard, and the rest of the team over at Haas. And with that, Frank, I will turn it over to you. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, yeah, it's always nice to be here, especially as you get the nicest introductions ever by Henry. He's very good at this. Okay. Yeah, what I want to do is start a little bit with sharing 3 small projects we did over in Germany on open innovation, one's with customer, one with companies, and one in a very different setting. And then talk about the capabilities of companies to become open. As the more we are looking into open innovation now as a company phenomena, we are going beyond this piloting stage. Most companies have an open innovation pilot, and they are just trying it out. But we studied in a large scale sample 380 organizations and looked into what differences them by being open and turning this into performance, and what is just being open but being not so high in performance with regard to the innovation output. So, Aachen, just very briefly, I have to advertise my place as I pay my ticket. We say the MIT of Germany, the largest technical school in Germany. Every second engineer that works in the German automotive industry comes from our school. Every 5th board member of a German company comes from our school, very much rooted in the engineering discipline. I'm at the business school, which is mainly industrial engineering students, very technically focused, nice colleagues, and some of these companies sponsored the research. So much for the commercials. Okay, so if you talk about open innovation nowadays, you have to define what open innovation is. And I come to Henry's definition in 2 slides. And this is a little bit my focus I want to take, and it's a little bit more narrower on the phenomena. So, and by the way, these signs are by Berkeley in top. They are not on my slides. And perhaps the computer guy can delete them. So for me, open innovation is the formal discipline and practice of leveraging the discoveries of unobvious others. So, and you will see it in the next example that I really focus on open innovation, on getting input from people we don't think about in the first place when we innovate it. And you do it by formal and by informal relationships, and especially these informal relationships, what I think is why open innovation is an important new phenomena. And I also, in my talk, more or less will focus on inbound open innovation. Here we have Hank Chesborough's definition. Of course, outbound open innovation is very important, that you exploit your discoveries, but it will be not so much the focus of my talk. Okay, so 3 recent examples of open innovation, why I'm still very happy about it, and I think it's really, even after 10 years of Henry's first article, it's still a great, great topic. So the first is on one tool or method of open innovation that has been called wrong switch. Again? Yes, well, broadcast search. Who knows what broadcast search is? Anyone heard about it? Yes. Test passed. So I will explain you, and the term has been coined, I think, by Karim Lakhami in his PhD thesis at MIT. He's now assistant professor at Harvard Business School. And broadcast search is done by these companies, 9 Sigma, Innocentive, and yet to come. And now I see some, okay, you know the business models of these companies. So broadcast search means you take a problem, a technical problem, typically of a company, and you broadcast it to an open audience. And then in a kind of competition, and then the one who has the best solution submits a solution, and then the best solution gets an award or licensing contract, and so on. So I was giving a talk on open innovation for German engineers, and they all listened quietly and politely, as Germans are, and I gave them some example from Procter & Gamble, consumer good, and chemical companies, and they said, very interesting, but it never will work for us. We are German engineers, you know, German engineers. So if you Google engineer, these are here, they are male, they have a funny hat on their head, and they look like that they can solve tough problems. So, and this is what also in schools like mine, what we teach engineers, you know how to solve things. You're a solution provider. And so there was this group of companies from the heart of German engineering, automotive. And so there's this group of 250 companies in the driving system industry. And they are like an industry association, and they collect their money and fund research, basic research. And so one of these guys heard my presentation and said, yeah, interesting, but it never will work in the German driving system industry. And you know what? All of our companies are the world market leaders in this field. And we know everyone, and we know everything about it. So how do you want to connect us with outsiders? Still, they gave me a lot of money to test it, what was nice. And so what we did is, and this is the FRA, this company, we had a contract and just passed it, and they gave me 5 problems they had from their past research agenda. And these 5 problems, traditionally, they would have assigned, as they did in the past, to German professors with contract research. So they would say, oh, this is a problem we are all interested in, and we are in the pre-competitive field, and they would give it in contract research to a big research institute, pay them €500,000, and say, now you have 2 years, come up with a solution, and then we share the property rights. So we got 5 problems they couldn't really solve in the past. And I show you some of the problems. And one was, and this is a holy grail if you're an engineer, a non-lubricated gear material. So if you make gears, one of the big problems are lubricants in the gear. And it's like a holy grail when they asked this, or at least a step towards it. Another problem they gave was, okay, let's say if you have a gearing system, you have lubricants inside, how can you remove the dirt that is coming out of it? Another problem was a quality control measure. So to inspect the surface of properties by non-destroying the piece. As there was new regulation, and before they always destroyed the component for quality testing, but there was new regulation that you have to test every single item. Okay, if your only known measure is to destroy the item, what can you sell? So they were really in need for this procedure. And we picked a company called 9 Sigma. We did a big study on comparing all these platforms, and for some reasons we picked 9 Sigma, and I personally, as a professor, became a client of 9 Sigma. and then we posted these problems we got from the company. They were translated in these slides you just saw. And then we had about 4 weeks where outsiders could post solutions. And this is what we got. So first, solutions providers really were coming from industry, universities, and research institutions or small suppliers. Many of North America, US or Canada, many of Europe, some from the rest of the world. But among those 44% of Europe, only 15% was coming from Germany. And beforehand, these companies only talked to German professors. And what was the really surprising results? So here we had our challenges. If you first look in these numbers, the majority of institutions that submitted a possible solution were entirely known to these guys. They've never ever had heard about that this institution existed. And of the solutions they got, also the majority for some problems were entirely new to these guys that all told me before, we are the world market leaders, we know everything of it. And this for me is a very, very good example of open innovation by connecting with this open board to these unobvious others you never thought about before. And what it really is about this theme of open innovation is increasing the productivity of problem solving. You get it for a cheaper price. Nine Sigma asked about $20,000 for one request for proposal before they already invested $500,000 to give this problem to a professor who couldn't solve it, and these are sunk costs. It's a contract research. Well, we fund a lot of students, so we are happy that companies give us this, but from a company perspective, sunk costs. And also on a quite high sophisticated level, as some of the solutions were as good as companies only had to sign a purchasing agreement, as the solution was really there. They could get it, like this quality inspection thing. They could just write a purchasing agreement, no further research required. But also, and I will come to this later, some of these companies that, and I have to tell you, this was the toughest problem in this project, and this is why I sometimes hate to do with work companies, even if the outcome is nice, but it took us about half a year to get problems from the companies. All the risk was sponsored by the association. But there were some people in these companies, and they had to admit, we have a problem we can't solve, and we would somehow broadcast it there to the public. And these are two quotes for guys that stood like half a year like this in front of me, say, no, I don't give you my problem. But then they give, and then they said the real, so they learned a lot about new players' positions in the technology space, but the big aha, you say this in English? So we say, yeah? Okay. So this big aha, however, was that we did learn so much about ourselves in this company. Where are we? What we don't know? Or this one here. After we did this one project, this one request, our culture really shifted dramatically. We were very close, and we learned somehow what are the benefits of to become more open. It was clearly a driver of this change. I'll come back to these quotes in a minute. But first, let me give you another example. So here we have one of these typical examples of open innovation, technical problem solving, small, medium-sized enterprise, traditional industries, and really connecting them to the world. Well, in another project, we went more out to users and customers. And this is one of the research where I did, which was the foundations where I entered into open innovation. As for a long time, I was interested in the role of users and customers in the innovation process. So another really important facet of open innovation is to open your innovation process towards input of customers. And here we did it in a field with customers that normally are never included, senior citizens. So probably there's a group somewhere here in Berkeley that have these kind of suits. Guess what is the problem? Let's say you get hired as an engineer, some of you are engineers, after a degree in a company, and there is this booming market for senior citizens. Well, You're young, you're bright, but how do you develop a product that is used by someone that's 50 years older than you? Well, you dress like a senior citizen. So there are senior citizen simulators. That's the holy grail. You put this on, and this is what all they do, and they try to interview people, but you're really far away. It's the same problem you have if you develop toys for kids. How do you know how a 4-year-old guy or girl behaves or wants? So, well, but we said, no, can't be. It's nice for ergonomics, but we can't change the mindset and so on. And we said, okay, let's try the ultimate extreme case of user innovation, put 75 plus people into the role of developing products for themselves. And for this project, we picked a cell phone. So we have another project where we really say, okay, let's really go to this extreme case of user innovation. Can we build a platform where senior citizens can develop? And in the first contest, yeah, what we said is the cell phone. And you know something about senior citizen cell phones? What are they? How do they look? They are big? Big buttons, what else? Not good. Okay, big numbers, big batteries, as grandma always is too stupid to recharge it. And that's the state of the industry. It's, by the way, a big, big market. There's one leading company in Europe called Emporia, and no one heard about it, but they have the same market share as the iPhone. So, 8% in Germany, just this Emporia company. Big, big market. Big money, but exactly these kind of cell phones. Well, and we made a website, and very easy in the first step, and said, well, everyone, we wouldn't discriminate for age. So everyone was invited to submit ideas and solutions for new cell phone, and the German name was Einfacher Telefonieren, making a call more simple. So it was more about simpler, easier to use. We didn't discriminate for age. We had someone helping us how to address these people, and so on. And this was a website, as there are many, where people could submit an idea, describe it, and other people could comment on the ideas, build on the ideas. Think of a Wikipedia for ideas. Worked really good. And, well, now the ideas are in German, but we had two kinds of people participating. This was the interesting point. The one were guys like you thinking of your grandparents or parents. And a lot of industrial design students participated that perhaps got it as an assignment to think of a senior citizen cell phone as an obvious task for a professor to assign to their students. So half of the participants was people thinking of their grandparents or this market. And everything what they submitted was something like this, like an alarm button for your cell phone. Something like health monitoring, you know, looking that your heartbeat is correct. All these obvious stuff, not really implemented, but tracking senior citizens, tracking their health. The other half were our target group, 75 plus. And guess what they submitted? A dating function, cool outlooks, much more something like an iPhone, but not one functionality on health or security or anything. And we had this head of the owner of this Emporia company and the head of Deutsche Telekom, the biggest distributor, and they were part of the jury meeting. And I was there as well. And when we selected the winners, there were a number of ideas which were coming from the 75 plus people, where they said, yeah, it's so obvious, we will do it, but we never thought about it, that these guys want to have these ideas. So putting unobvious others as inputs for the innovation process. And it developed even one step further. So we got one idea, and it was a really cool hardware design. There's a video, but for reasons of time, they don't show it yet. It was a mixture with an iPhone and a sliding thing, very clever design. And they submitted even a small video illustrating it. And when I looked into it, I first said, really cool. And then when we decided to give them an award, we really looked, who are these people? And these are the winners. And you see again a young guy. But he's a special young guy. He has autism. And so we realize there's a group of people with autism. And if you know this illness, people that have autism, they are very, very bright normally in one specific capability. But they are not really able to work in a normal work life, as they need silence, they need very structured procedures. But then we learned there was this one group of people with autism, and they had a website called Odd Workers. And they connected over the internet with their skills to participate in these kind of idea contests, to submit ideas to Innocentive and now Nine Sigma. As they realized with this wave of open innovation, there's a new market for solutions, and they are not being discriminated. We didn't know that these were people with autism. We just thought it's a cool design. Traditionally, if you hire something with autism, it's corporate social responsibility, and you have a special pot for this. But you don't really talk to them as suppliers. And they said, with this platform, no one discriminates. So, and they were quite successful with it. And it was actually, when we had the award ceremony in Berlin for this prize, the first time that some people of this group that used to work on the internet were met for the first time in person. And then we think we may shift this also one step higher, as think of older people. When we are living in a society with strong demographic change, not so much in the US, as you have many more young people, but in Europe, most countries really have a strong aging society. So we know we have to put back these people and keep their capabilities. And I think here, and this is what we now want to build, and again, sorry that it's a German site, we said innovation from experience. So we are now building a community of old people, 75 plus, that have a lot of experience, and they can connect there, and now not just submit ideas, but some of them also have exactly the skills and the knowledge and the capabilities to do the technical problem solving. And we pitched it now to a number of senior associations, and we get big, big support for it. That's another facet of open innovation, really incorporating unobvious people in your innovation process where you never thought about it before. Okay, and I skipped this. And if we just see these two examples. Now, from a company perspective, if you remember back our SMEs in machinery, for them going into this mood, going back from this German engineering mindset, you know, no job is tough enough for me, but asking somewhere in the outways. And some of these examples, again, same story came from India. And so sorry for Indians, but if you're a German company and you get a solution by an Indian company by email, you think it's spam. You know, you don't consider it as serious. Here, they could prove this is a technical solution, and they signed it. So, but also internally, it really took these companies a long time to become open. And the same with our senior citizens. So if we pitch these ideas and this example to other companies now, we're now talking to big automotive companies, they all say, oh, it's nice, but then they give us 10 reasons why it never will work. So what I now learned is that after 10 years of open innovation, I think first we know it works. It exists. We know you can profit from it. But I think now in the next years, we really have to look more into how we get companies to become ready for open innovation. And if you consider some examples in the literature, perhaps you had the case study on 3M and lead users in one of your classes. It's one of the classic examples. You know what happened at 3M after the case was published?
No, so we gave it wasn't really a case.
You just got the example. So there was this Harvard case and a video published about how good 3M is to get lead users with special characteristics. And after Harvard published the case in 2001, 3M closed the lead user study. They didn't do any lead user studies since this. There's a big German automotive company with 3 letters, and they have a big virtual customer lab. If you go to their group homes, they're very, very nice. You can submit ideas. And over the last 5 years, they got 5,000 in the last 5 years, 5,000 ideas, technical ideas. They put one into practice. As all the ideas go to the desk of some responsible manager and he looks on it and says, nice idea, but I have something in my shelf what is as good as my promotion only depends on my personal patent portfolio, and why should I buy an idea of someone else? And if you look in some of the leadership on the success stories of companies like P&G, AkzoNobel, Unilever, and some of them you have here as best practice examples. And you will hear, probably, very sure, over the course of the seminar, by companies that say we are successful in open innovation. Normally, they always, at the same time, really stress the internal leadership and the internal organization that help them to connect better to the outside. So this is why we got interested in studying it. And let's open it. Our hypothesis was that there is something like an inverted U shape. And for the one of you who are in business school, you will learn business school professors love inverted U shapes. As then you always have one point that is optimum, and you don't have to say very clearly where it is, and you can make a lot of arguments. So our inverted, it's true, Henry, isn't it? And here we have openness. And here, innovation performance, very simple. So we say there's one point that, of course, being open is positive. Well, this is where the entire seminar is about. I don't have to convince you, I just gave you the examples in my cases. But obviously, there are also some negative points connected with being too open. Perhaps you share too much knowledge. Perhaps it really comes with too high transaction coordination costs. Perhaps there's a too big distance between the parties. Perhaps it's difficult really to reintegrate this external knowledge. So there may be an optimal space. And there may be some companies for which the optimal space, whatever they do, because of the internal capabilities, they never go beyond one performance plateau. There may be others, like these blue line companies, that have internal structures that allow them to be more open and really profit even more out of it. And this is what we called open innovation readiness. Somehow, how ready are you to really profit from being open? And from a theoretical background, so now 5 theory slides or so, we build on 5 schools of literature. One is absorptive capacity. Heard about that? Not many? Okay, yeah. So it's one of the really fancy concepts, very big. In the moment, I explain it in the middle, in a second, and then something on corporate culture and just the formal organization. So absorptive capacity has been structured by Zahra and George into 4-part capabilities. One is about the potential of absorbing external knowledge, and the other is of realizing this knowledge and turning it into really an outcome for your organization. And so what is differentiated are 4 stages. The first is acquisition. So how good are you in screening external knowledge, in recognizing there's external knowledge you could benefit from, and getting it into your organization. And we said there are some things like organizational things we could observe in companies that would moderate the level of acquisition in a company. Like, does a company has cross-functional interfaces? Do they have specific routines? Are they in a participative mode? And so on. The next stage is assimilation. So once the knowledge is in, you have to bring it to the right place in your organization. You have to access it, to evaluate it, perhaps to reformat it in a way. So again, a number of ways that in the previous literature has been connected with a good assimilation skill by companies. Then after you assimilated it, you have to transform it, meaning you have to combine this external knowledge with internal knowledge to really solve a technical problem, to make a new design, to create a product, and so on. And finally, you have to be able to exploit it, to turn it really into a profit or outcome. Then on culture, there are two kinds of orientations that has been described in companies, how they learn about new things and about their style, how to collaborate. So learning is, you can measure the propensity of a company, their open-mindedness, do they share a common vision or something, and collaboration. Are there any specific barriers that help, that prevent people to collaborate in a company? Okay, so we got our data. We looked into 386 European technology companies, and then if you know a little bit how to tweak your statistic program out of your data cloud, you get your curve, and you see it, but it's statistically proven that it's there. But to make the argument a little bit easier, we did a cluster analysis and clustered our companies in 4 sets. So we have the non-innovators we don't care about any longer. They are neither open nor have a big innovative performance. Of course, we have the open innovation champions, which are very open and really turn this openness into performance. But we also found closed innovation champions. So companies that don't really do open innovation, but still have a very high performance level. But then, and those are the really interesting ones, we found companies that are very open in the way of their practices, but they were not able to really transform this into performance. So these are the 4 groups we have done, and I'm especially interested into the differences between these 2 groups in the following. And to structure it, and now comes again the managerial version of this talk, we found some of these yin and yangs of open innovation, of organizing for open innovation. So we found, to say it in a nutshell, that these companies that are good in open innovation are really able to balance between 2 different kinds of organizational design. So in the literature, there has been a description, if you put together these variables, between a mechanistic structure, we could call it a German structure, very formal, very organized, very strict, and perhaps a US-American structure, more organic, lower formalization, lower specialization, not so, or let's put Silicon Valley's structure perhaps. And so if we look into the data, you find the following. So I have to explain you how to read the charts, and they are a little bit misleading. So it's not a curve, actually, it's just these points which matter, as these are just the 4 clusters, so there's no data in between. Non-innovators, closed innovation champions, these open innovation beginners, and the open innovation champions. And just without giving you any statistic numbers, you immediately see there are big differences, how these companies are set up. So if we look for the degree of decentralization, this was very interesting for us, as our thesis were that companies that are really good in profiting from open innovation are more decentralized. We thought if you want to be open, you have to be decentralized. Many people have to be in charge to connecting with the outside. Interestingly, we found the companies that really profit from it are less decentralized. Also with regard to formalization. So people that seem to profit from it are much more formal in the way how they interact with outsiders. And very, very strong difference, they seem to have a specialized unit or specialized role of connecting with the outside. And also these companies, and this was just an index value on different practices in human resource management, they seem to have specific practices in place how to train their people to connect with the outside. So this was not so surprisingly, but the others were a little bit differently what we originally thought, and there's some literature that suggests traditionally to connect with outsiders, you should be not so formal and should be more decentralized. We found the opposite. So companies that are really able to profit from open innovation, and this is then when we went back to these companies that had this pattern and talked to them really saw they had a specialized unit somehow, an organizational discipline, someone responsible for organizing this open innovation. And it was not passed of everyone. We also found clear difference in the way how companies entered open innovation. So, and in the literature, there are two different streams what you can do. The one, again, is very German. You can plan it and think it. So you do a lot of cognitive learning, meaning before I do open innovation, I do a big internal survey. I do a big risk analysis. I talk to many, many people. I hire Henry to assess my organization. So I really try to do everything right before I do it. The other way is, no, I just do a trial and error. I just do a quick pilot, see what is the outcome, and learn out of trial and error. So again, we found that these open innovation champions seem to have really more planning tools ahead. They do it in a sophisticated way. It's not just trial and error. So we could measure that they have these planning tools in head. However, at the same time, you see the huge, huge difference here. They also had a mode of doing trial and error. So after they planned, they said, we can't plan everything. We have to do a pilot. We have to go out there. We have to start doing it. Like our companies in the two projects I presented, they said, we don't believe it. We planned for 1 year. We hired a professor to do it for us, but then we did pilots and just tried it, if it works and what are the outcomes. And finally, there's this difference between free revealing and IP protection. So on the one hand side, it has been said, if you want to profit from open innovation, you have to also share your knowledge. It's not just that you can absorb external knowledge, but that people give you knowledge, you also have to share something back. But on the other hand, and this is when the lawyers come in place, they say, well, get everything, but don't tell what you know. We have to profit from it. So also here, we saw that on the one hand side, companies that are more likely to profit from open innovation are also really better in freely revealing, sharing with the knowledge. And we measured it just by an index value of different practices, what their people do, like going a lot to conferences, being an industry association, publishing, and so on. But at the same time, these companies that are very open also have a much better tool set of protecting their IP. And what we measured here was not just patents and trademarks, but we had a big bunch of practices to protect your knowledge, including contractual arrangement, NDAs, formal rules, but especially internal organization, high pace to market, complex product designs, strict confidentiality. So not just these formal legal rules, also engineering rules or internal practices. And again, we could saw that, interestingly, these people that are really open and profit from it, they are also much more better in using these tools as the closed innovators. That said, we don't talk to anyone, and we're profitable into it, and much better than the beginners. So if we look into this, we can say, yes, it matters. There really are differences in companies, and probably open innovation really is a different kind of process and method in the innovation process, which requires specific capabilities, tools, and organizational practices, and it's not just another way to innovate. And then in the next step, and this is now the research we are doing in the moment, we said, well, here we did it ex post. So we looked into existing companies and looked into their past and their past behavior. But it would be nice to have like a quick test. that we run a test, and I was inspired, you know, these women magazines, and there you have quick tests for everything. You answer 10 questions and you know what kind of dating you are and whatever, everything. And I thought if they can solve such a complicated question like dating or whatever in 10 questions, we should do it with something simple like corporate innovation as well. So, and I don't know if we get it down to 10 questions, but we are now really looking in this data and also collecting much more data to get like a simple tool to give it into the hand of companies and say, well, answer these questions before you invest a lot in like hiring Innocentive and Nine Sigma or putting up an open innovation contest, customer idea contest. Perhaps you better work first on some internal measures, change your incentive structure, educate people, that once you get this external knowledge, you also can put it into place. And so, yeah, what we track here, 4 areas, very similar to what I just presented. And yeah, in the first assessment, you answer like, I think it's now 35 questions, and you get a little bit of score, and it tells you where you are compared to the benchmark. But this still is work to be done. Okay, I'm at the end. So for the managers here, some questions really I would like you to ask. I come to the researchers or the students, academics in the next slide. But beyond of, well, what is in and what intermediary should I pick, and you know, how can I get rich with open innovation? Really, what are these obstacles in an organization which may prevent you from benefiting from it? And I realize that many companies, even, well, probably both of us, we say open innovation is not a buzzword. It's really something fundamental new. But it has a little bit this hype factor connected with it. And that you say, okay, don't just move into it, really think properly internally and think beforehand what could be these obstacles that would hinder you to profit from it. What are the measures you have to prevent not invented here? You know this term, not invented here? Whereas, and normally, traditionally not invented here was between marketing and production, marketing and R&D. Now we're talking about getting the knowledge from some bright Indian guys and bring it to a conservative German mechanical engineering companies. So this is not invented here. It's really to a new dimension. And what kind, and there are some measures that companies know to prevent intra-organizational, not invented here. Can you use this also to prevent inter, so external knowledge, and so on? So some of the research we are doing currently to address these issues. So what I said, really try to replicate and refine this open innovation readiness measure on a micro level. Meaning what we've done before in this study, we looked into organizations. So normally if you do research by yourself in the social sciences, you had to have a survey and to send it to 2 or 3 managers and ask them to really answer for their organization or business unit. But we feel that really if we go to these barriers, they are not on the organizational level, they are on the personal level of individuals. So we are now replicating and developing scales. It's more like an employee survey instrument where we really can survey each individual in this organization to then construct an open innovation readiness score and this quick test. Yeah, we're also in this data I just thought for the final papers with a lot of more data analysis. Also from looking into it, we really learned, everyone is quoting not invented here. And this is probably one of the most quoted papers. It came out of a master's student thesis at MIT in the early 80s. And this is the only empirical study available on not invented here. So everyone quoting, there's a Katz-Allen paper, 1986 or something. There's one other PhD thesis we found. No one really looked empirically into not invented here in a way as it was constructed. I have now one student where we teamed up with the Department of Psychology and really go back in the psychological foundations on why people don't really accept knowledge from other backgrounds. And everyone said it is so. We know from practical experience that it seems to hold true, but we really don't know what are the fundamental mechanisms that are in your head if you say this knowledge is not good to you. And we build on research why we have, why we don't like foreigners, for example. There's big research. They said no one would say, I don't like foreigners, but we know there are people that don't like foreigners. So, and we exactly transfer this research as no one would say, I don't like chemical engineering knowledge, but we know that perhaps I don't like chemical engineering knowledge if I'm a mechanical engineer. Okay, yeah, and then a last thing on these idea contests. Don't just have this small example on the senior citizens. They are omnipresent now. Almost every company has an idea contest, but still we don't really know very good how to design these idea contests, what are the parameters, and it's like the 4 Ps in marketing. What is really the product? It's the website design, the incentive structure would be the price, how you frame the message, like what we learned with the senior citizens. If we would have asked, give us a senior citizen handset, they wouldn't have participated. But if we would have, how can we make cell phoning more simple, they reacted. Yeah, promotion and the place where to position it. Okay, that was it. And I rushed a little bit that we also have time for questions. I think we still have time for questions. Yeah, okay, first, thanks for listening and open for any debate. Okay, and one more, advertisement is not here. Okay, and I wanted to announce our conference, but...
All right, any questions? Okay. I'll bring the microphone to you.
You want me to bring up the
okay, all right.
conference on that?
We could, yeah.
Have you found any correlation between kind of purpose-based or very mission-based, high mission-based corporations, how they are able to be more innovative than those that maybe don't have as high
yeah,
vision?
So there's probably a specific scale or concept behind purpose-based and mission-based, which we didn't have in our survey. But I would say, just from experience, by working now with a lot of companies, so we don't have this explicitly in the survey, I would say that in general, companies which are more purpose-based are easier to do open innovation as they are a little bit more problem-focused. Well, if it's mission-based, it's normally what is said to be better and, on the cultural level, and everyone looks into the same direction. But from my understanding of open innovation, a strong part of being successful is in asking the right question and really formulating the problem very good. And this is also traditionally in engineering school, we teach people to think in solutions. And there's this famous quote by Albert Einstein. He said, if I have 1 hour to solve a problem, I would think 55 minutes on the question. And then in 5 minutes, I could solve the problem. And in companies, we totally normally act the other way around. And especially if we all follow the same mission, we think, okay, that's the big thing, we have to go. Why? If we really, and this is what I interestingly found, some organizations which are very technical, they are, once they understood it, really much better in formulating the problem correctly. They need to connect with the outside world instead of just thinking, okay, this is a solution, I need this piece of the solution, let's acquire it. But this is just guesswork. It's just anecdotal evidence.
I was wondering if you noticed any trend or differences in the types of innovations that companies are currently using this for, whether it's kind of incumbent firms that are doing sustaining innovations and just kind of incremental improvements to their products, or if it's going into completely new areas where there's low institutional knowledge?
Yeah, very good question. So again, no statistical data on it, but I would say in general, it is incumbents, big organizations that do open innovation, especially properly. And this was also, I don't have the descriptive variables in this presentation, but on our open innovation champions, the majority of these was large organizations. As they also had this organizational slack to build this particular unit. But I think it don't have to be like this. I would say in general, a small or medium-sized enterprise could profit even more from open innovation as they have a constrained knowledge space, just by definition. There are not so many people. But still on the market side, often they have to become solution providers. So often, you can't sell a component or machine any longer. In most markets, they want a solution. So they need a larger knowledge stock. But again, also just in general innovation management, small SMEs, they are often not so good. They're good in technical problem solving, but they are not so good in innovation management. And I think this is somehow a starting point you have to have also before to move to the next level of really do open innovation properly. But in theory, I think, and this should be also, I think it's an interesting question for research. How can we help SMEs and what kind of players or perhaps even business models we can put in place of helping SMEs to connect with the outside world in open innovation? As nowadays, if you look on the client base of Nine Sigma, Innocentive, or all these open innovation intermediaries, all the clients are big corporations.
Thank you. I wonder how to evaluate the innovation performance.
Yeah.
What is the detailed metrics of your performance, especially from the beginning and the champion? What are the major obstacles?
Yeah, so for this, and I can give you the paper if you are more interested, we used very established scales from the literature. So we measured first outcome like success rate in new products for all product companies, no service companies, compared to their competitors. But then also we measured financial performance and market performance, like market share and so on. So it was both product innovativeness in a way, market performance like market share, and financial performance like profitability, all measured with established scales.
Hello, I had a question about the inverse U-shape, and I was just wondering if it's like sector specific, and I have also another question if it's like type of knowledge specific, like from the literature it's like Antonelli between analytical, synthetic and symbolic knowledge. It's also related to the knowledge value chain, like exploration, examination, and exploitation.
Yeah, wow.
Just to know, no, sorry, it's maybe too many questions.
No, it's very good.
Time.
It's 10 PhD theses to answer this, I would say. As it's many big concepts you are mentioning. First, I think the first thing with regard to the sector, our sample were only a few sectors. So we had it was more mechanical engineering kind of companies, machine tool, medical equipment, automotive components, and so on. So, for example, we don't have service companies. We don't have fast-moving consumer goods here. And probably this is another question for research to really replicate this in different sectors. Within our sample, we couldn't find any differences between sectors. So second, for different kind of knowledges, again, we only looked for technical knowledge. Really think of my first project with these German companies, these kind of questions. Of course, again, you could replicate it to get access to better customer knowledge, market knowledge, something like this, trend information. Again, we constrained it to technical knowledge. And then on the different stages in the process, so is it really explorative knowledge at the very beginning if I do rather basic research, or is it more exploitation, more incremental knowledge? Again, we couldn't control for that, but from the way how we framed the questionnaire, I would say It's something in the middle. So it's not really applied knowledge. It was not on the project level. We addressed R&D people, you know, not project managers. But in R&D, well, sometimes it's really research and others it's more applied development. We couldn't control for that. But it's all many, many interesting questions to follow up. And this is how research works, that you bring it down to chunks. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay.
I have a specific question. Have you heard of Cypress Semiconductors?
On
Cypress? Oh.
Cypress Semiconductors?
Yeah, it's a pretty.
Why should I have
well-known.
known about it? What
Oh,
are
it's a
they doing
business
good?
case. It's a business case from one of my courses. But the question
Okay.
was, the way the company is organized, it has little small chunks which function as separate entities, and they compete against each other within the company, which makes each chunk more efficient. But they also can contract with outside people when the performance inside the company is not satisfactory. So where would they fall on your matrix of companies?
In my matrix, they would be, our analysis as usual was on the business unit level. So if these chunks would be like a business unit, they would be just one company, you know. I think this is a very, I don't know the case, but it sounds for me like a very innovative setup. Probably this is why you had it as a case of organizational structure, which is not a norm in many companies, that you have really small units that compete with each others and the outsides. And again, never thought about it. That's an interesting question, especially also, can you do like open innovation in between these chunks if they compete on the market, say in the company, as there has been some nice research on larger organizations that actually shows that the most efficient knowledge transfer between units is between divisions of a big organization, take GE. So as then you don't have IP problems, you have a common knowledge, but still you're far away from each other to really profit from different knowledge stocks. And that could be the case here, but just guessing. No. Okay, so I'm here if you have more questions. It was pretty research orientated, as I have realized in the end, not as practice, but I hope still it was interesting for you. You got some ideas. And then the commercial, the big one. Hopefully all of you don't graduate in May, or you're still here long enough. Otherwise, you are in company very rich and can pay the fee. So we do a big conference in November. This gentleman is the co-chair. And on really connecting open innovation, what we just talked, also with customers, with mass customization, which is to customize things. And these were two fields that were not related before, what's not as seen to be related before, but from practice we know there are a lot of relationships, and this is what we want to explore here on the conference. Okay, so warm invitation, there's a call for papers, so you even can present your research there. Okay, yeah, with this, thank you very much for coming and listening so nicely.
Thank you, Dr. Keller. Maybe can you tell us a little bit about some good examples of mass customization that you can give us, because you are in the classroom and maybe we'd like to hear some of those. Some of the best examples we are talking at lunch.
Okay, I'd ask you, what are, you know mass customization? Yeah, you know a good example of customized goods?
Well, I think it's Nike who started to really
Nike.
give customers the opportunity to design their own shoes. Basically.
Exactly, Nike ID, yeah.
But a large number of them, and you could just do some specific letters on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, some symbols, whatever you would like.
Yeah, absolutely. Nike ID, Timbuktu messenger bags, someone has it? Pretty big, was alumni of the Haas School, was one of the first big customized bag companies. Actually, every sneakers company is allowing nowadays you to customize the shoes. Dell computers, no, you all have Apples. Oh no, there I see one remaining Dell down there. Okay, that was a business model built on customization. Linux, very interesting. This is exactly where we come together. Linux as an operation system, traditionally most people would use the standard code. But of course, if you look into Webmaster's survey, like why they get an Apache web server, let's say open source, it's not Linux. They say as we can easier customize it compared to proprietary server like a Windows web server. And so this is exactly where an open source, open innovation model is coming up, and therefore it's an excellent example. We should have an entire session on this. It's really good, don't thought about it. But this entire open source software movement is very much driven by the need of users to customize the software to the specific application.
I feel like also like the difference between Android, Apple
Yeah.
market versus like Apple. That would be interesting to see.
Yeah. Yeah, this is on this platform realm. It's between open and closed business models, same with Nokia and so on. Yeah, it's one. But I think this is more still on the, well, it's not so much customization, it's more different kinds of openness on the business model side, which is very fascinating to look into. Yeah. Okay, so more about this. 5 days, yeah, it's 5 days long. So a lot of talks on these topics, and if you talk to Solomon, he will be the conference organizer. He will give you a discount, probably. Okay, let's close here, that you probably have another classes. Okay.